It was a crazy trip. A 2-day trip with only stops for gas, restroom, and fast food home after what was supposed to be 2 weeks of renewal. It was getting late. We got home, and there was barely any edible food in the house. I got up early for work, stopped by the local donut shop to eat a couple of my favorites, and grab a coffee on the way. The whole office was surprised by my very early return. There was no time for a full lunch, so I ate a package of cheese crackers and a soda at my desk. Met with the boss and got my ass kicked for someone else's mistake. Got home in time to see my wife, Lori, driving down the street in a rented truck. Her destination is unknown, at least to me. I pulled a protein bar out of the refrigerator that we took with us on the ill-fated trip. The food we had put in it when we left was lying there unused, the ice and ice packs had melted, and everything was warm. The protein bar was soaked with water from the melted ice and was inedible. In the living room, almost all of the things she had before the wedding were gone. I went to the bedroom. The dresser and her childhood dresser were gone too. None of her things were there, and the closet was empty. In the kitchen, on the island, stood 3 dirty coffee cups. Her family's china and crystal were gone. None of this came as a surprise. The purpose of the trip was to try to resolve a few issues that had arisen in our 2-year marriage. Honestly, we only had one big one, but it was the most serious. To cheat or not to cheat, that was the question. My vote was in favor of not cheating. One of the songs the DJ played at our reception was about a fever wedding, and it described us very well. We had only known each other for 6 months before we got married. Can you imagine how many people told us both that it was a huge mistake to get married so early? The short answer: pretty much everyone I knew or was involved with. The same was true for her, but we didn't listen because we were in love and knew everything better than all of them combined. God, what idiots we were. The fever mentioned in the song at the reception ended pretty soon after the priest pronounced us husband and wife. The remnants of the wedding cake hadn't even had time to get stale yet before the problem started. They started with her new boss's son, a college football player who'd been raised to believe he was entitled to whatever he wanted. His father bought the car dealership where my wife worked. There are 6 car dealerships in our town, and after Martin Justin Jr. bought the one Lori worked at, he owned 3 of them. Lori worked there for 4 years and was instrumental in getting my cousin Jeffrey hired at the car dealership. Everyone who knew Jeff loved him and trusted him. He's not the smartest or fastest guy in the world, but cleaning cars was a job he enjoyed and he did it well. He's also not a bad mechanic, but he never had the confidence to work his butt off. He was one of my best men at my wedding, and in addition to being my cousin, I considered him a good friend. After Justin bought the dealership, his son didn't come at first because he was in school, but as the summer wore on, he started coming, and the office, where mostly women worked, became his favorite place to hang out. It wasn't long before Lori's desk became the center of his universe when he was at the dealership. At first, according to Lori, he was a nerd. Then she didn't say anything about him, and I figured he had either stopped or moved on to someone else to annoy. One evening, Jeff was more silent than usual as he and I sat on the porch of Lori and I's rented house. He loved beer, but had a very low tolerance for alcohol, so I always had a beer nearby for him. If he knew the difference, he never said anything. Don't misunderstand. He's not a dumbass. He just can't get the gist of things quickly, but when he learns something, anything, he never forgets, and he's very loyal to his friends, especially me. So we sat on the porch. He said nothing and hardly touched his drink. I often noticed him looking at me. Okay, Jeff. What's up? Roger likes Lori. Roger was Justin's son. I chuckled. Everyone likes Lori. Lori likes Roger. No, she doesn't. Tim, I'm not that slow. He spends a lot of time talking to her. Today he left for lunch at the same time she did, and they came back at the same time. Lori never went to lunch. She always ate in the break room and watched game shows on TV. Are you sure? He nodded slowly. It was the first sign that there was trouble in paradise. We didn't talk about it again that night. When she got home, I asked her if everything was okay at work and if she had any problems. Everything is fine. Why do you ask? No reason. Roger used to be a pest, and you haven't thought about him in a while. Oh, he's still a pest, but I can handle him. The second, third, and fourth signs came quickly, and they all came from Jeff. Inappropriate touches, like his hand on her ass or her hand on his leg when they sat close together. Stuff like that, but nothing that directly indicated cheating. I didn't like what I was hearing, but I didn't say anything about it to Lori. I just asked Jeff to keep an eye on them and let me know what he saw. On those occasions when he saw something inappropriate, he would call me. I was usually pretty aggressive and confrontational, but here I took my time for a couple reasons. First, I didn't want to think about her doing something inappropriate, like cheating, but I also didn't want to hear all the "I told you so" I would get from everyone I knew if she did cheat. At one afternoon, he called to say that Lori and Jeff were in Jeff's dad's office kissing. The kiss went over the top. That evening, I talked to her about it. She denied it at first, but finally admitted that she and Roger had played around and kissed a bit, but nothing serious happened. Is anything serious supposed to happen? I asked. Of course not, she replied. I made it unequivocally clear that I would not tolerate any more playing and kissing, and that adultery would certainly lead to divorce. We can get divorced as quickly as we got married, and I won't delay divorce if you ever sleep with anyone else. Although I never told her how I knew about her and Roger, Jeff was fired the next day. It wasn't hard to guess. Lori and I never discussed his firing, but I commented on how stupid it was to fire someone with a disability. I also mentioned that Jeff and I were going to file an ADA complaint against Justin. No one ever thought Jeff was disabled, just slow, and mentioning filing a complaint was just my excuse. He and I never discussed any of this. The next day, Jeff was taken back to work at one of the other two dealerships that Martin Justin, Jr. owned, but the employees where he originally worked protested so much that he was put back where he was. It was an interesting exercise in human relations. Virtually all the employees at the dealership stood up for Jeff. After our conversation and my statement that a divorce could be obtained quickly, Lori and I had several conversations about appropriate behavior for married people. First and foremost, it was about not allowing yourself to get into situations that are not approved by your spouse. For example, while having dinner alone with a member of the opposite sex who is not a family member may be perfectly innocent, his or her appearance can cause rumors, especially in a small town. Once rumors begin to spread, they can no longer be controlled, and a good reputation can quickly go south. After that conversation, we decided to take a vacation and try to recapture some of the magic, some of the fever referred to in the song at our reception. We planned the trip, got some time off, packed our bags, and off we went. It took us 2 full days to drive. The first few hours of the trip were pleasant enough, but then, we weren't even 4 hours into the trip when her phone rang. She looked at it, but didn't answer it. She did, however, turn the ringer off. Less than an hour later, she got another call. She held the phone in her hand and it vibrated. Feeling the vibration, she jumped up nervously. She looked at it but didn't answer, and a few minutes later asked if we could stop to go to the bathroom. We stopped at a large truck stop. I pulled up to the pump and she hopped out and went inside. I usually don't like thoughtless drivers who fill up the tank and then leave the car parked at the pump, while they themselves go to the store or use the restroom. This usually means that other drivers have to wait for them to fill up. Things go much more smoothly if you park your car after refueling and then go inside, but heck, those are just my complaints. I was the most careless person that time. As she hurried inside, I followed her. She didn't look back once, and as soon as she was outside the door, she was on the phone. I told you I'd call you when I had a chance. There was a pause. Damn it, Roger, I'm serious. I'll call you when I get back. Another pause. Roger, don't. She looked at her phone, then looked around. I ducked under a long shelf of appetizers and waited a few seconds before lifting my head to see if she was still there. She was standing with her back to me when I heard her words. You son of a bitch. Don't ever hang up on me again. Apparently, the son of a bitch did hang up because she looked at her obviously discharged cell phone again. This time, she didn't look around. She just tried to call him, but he wouldn't answer. She was looking at her phone when I walked over and stood in front of her. Is everything okay? I asked. Yeah, everything's fine. She looked at me. I have to go to the bathroom, she said, and hurried away. I went back to the car and filled up the tank. She came out with a soda. I looked at her. It's no big deal. I'll get mine, I said, as I went inside. She stared at me as if she didn't realize that it would have been nice to at least ask if I wanted anything from the store. Walking out of the store with my soda, I looked over. She was on the phone again. She ended the conversation just as I opened the door to get into the car. I said nothing, started the car, and drove off. That night we spent at a motel. Pizza was delivered to the room and we went to bed before 10 o'clock. We spent the whole next day driving, hardly speaking. We checked into the hotel, had dinner in the dining room, and went to bed. I was still awake, staring into the darkness, and it wasn't until after 11 that I saw her phone buzz. No noise, just the light. She jumped up and ran to the bathroom with it. I slowly got up and stood behind the closed bathroom door, trying to hear, but I couldn't. Please don't, were the only two words I understood. The conversation continued for another couple minutes as I stood there trying to make out what she was saying, but I couldn't. I was still standing still when she opened the door. She screamed. I had scared the shit out of her. What are you doing in there? She asked when she realized who it was. I was just wondering what you were doing in there. I pointed to the bathroom. Nothing, just going to the bathroom. And you needed your phone for that? Yeah, I used its light so I wouldn't hit anything. She tried to step around me. You forgot to flush. Oh, yes. She went back and flushed. Who were you talking to? What? Who were you talking to? No one. Why? I knew she was lying, and she knew I knew. I'm going to bed. In the morning, tell me who you talked to and what you talked about, or we're going home. We went on this trip to try to figure things out, but it takes both of us. Secrets don't bode well if that's our plan. I headed to bed where I fell asleep just before dawn. She was sitting on the couch in the room when I woke up about an hour after I fell asleep. I pulled myself up, put a couple pillows under me and looked at her. She answered me. That was Roger. What did he mean? He wants me to sleep with him. I thought for a moment before answering. Again? I asked. She hesitated before nodding. It was a shot in the dark on my part. I had no reason to believe that they had actually slept together. Honestly, I was dumbfounded by her admission. How many times have you slept with him so far? 2. Why? I'm not sure. The first time I think it was out of curiosity. And the second? He said if I didn't do it, he'd tell you. And he's threatening again. Yes. I knew what my reaction would be. I'd never let her know that cheating was okay. What's more, I'd told her explicitly what would happen if she cheated, and I expected no less from her if I cheated. You know that this will lead to the end of our marriage, don't you? Tears appeared in her eyes and she nodded again. I got up and went to the bathroom. Regardless of what's going on around you, when the urge to pee arises, you pee. After rinsing off the water and washing my hands, I brushed my teeth, washed my face, put the toothbrush and toothpaste back in the shaving kit, and opened the door. I'm on my way home. You can either come with me or wait for him to pick you up. It only took a few minutes to pack up and leave the room. I checked us in, we got in the car and began the long drive, with stops only for gas, restroom, and fast food mentioned earlier. This trip should have been an opportunity for her to apologize, beg for forgiveness, or plead for a second chance. But she did none of those things. Furthermore, we didn't speak the entire time. When we stopped, she bought her own food and I bought mine. If she needed to stop to use the restroom, she never once mentioned it. When we stopped, she was always the first one back in the car. At home, my first day of work was over. The house had been cleared of everything that belonged to Lori, and I hadn't eaten anything good in days. We had never used the only meal delivery service in town, but I figured now would be a good time to start. I went to their website, opened an account, and ordered my food. 40 minutes later, the delivery service rang the doorbell. I picked up my food, tipped the driver in addition to what I had added to the total when I ordered the food, and looked forward to enjoying it with a glass or two or six of wine. I put the food on a tray by the TV and sat down to eat. From my chair, I could see both the TV and the street through the front window. There was a car parked outside with someone sitting behind the wheel. As I ate, my attention shifted from the TV to the car where the driver was sitting. I had already eaten half of my portion, and the driver still hadn't moved. I took a sip of wine and walked outside. The driver saw me and rolled down his window. It was my food delivery driver, and she was in tears. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No. My car won't start and I can't call anyone for help." I hadn't paid attention to her or her car when she first arrived because my mind was on other things. Everyone I know is tied up or unresponsive, and my brother won't be able to make it for another hour. Another thing I didn't notice was the baby in the back seat. She was sitting with a book on her lap and looked like she wanted to cry too. "Would you like me to look at her?" "Oh God, please." She opened the door and slipped inside. I got behind the wheel and turned the key. Click, 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 then nothing. I did it again. No clicks this time. Just nothing. I'm not a mechanic, but I think I know when the battery is low. I brought my car around and tried to start it, but no luck. Suddenly, it was beyond me. "Look, why don't you two go inside? I'll have my cousin come in and take a look." They reluctantly followed me in. "Make yourselves comfortable while I get him." Jeff was there in 15 minutes, and her car was ready in 30. She thanked me, talked to Jeff, gave him a hug, and left. The next 2 days at work sucked. I didn't tell anyone about Lori, and my boss was on my ass like white on rice, and I was tired of it. My personal life was in the toilet, and he expected a sow's ear to make a silk purse on a marginally profitable project. I decided it was time for me to meet him. "I'm tired of being pestered by you. The project was a failure from the start, and I told you it was a failure. I hate ultimatums, but you either stay off my ass and let me see what I can make of it, or give it to someone else, or just kiss my ass and I'll walk out of here. Take your pick. I'm going home. Call me when you decide." I was sure he'd let me cool off for a couple days and then call me back to work. Besides, I needed to find a lawyer and start divorce proceedings. In the evening, I called Jeff to see if he wanted to have a drink, although drinking with him meant wine or beer for me and almost beer for him. "I can't. I have a date." He went on dates when we were both in high school, and when I was in college, he would often call and tell me about his rare dates and ask my advice. If he was lucky, I never heard about it, but he was the kind of guy who wouldn't brag about it even to me. Besides being a bit slow, he was also terribly shy, and strangers made him very nervous. "Well then, good for you. Who's the lucky girl?" "Jenny." "Jenny who?" "The food girl." "What food girl?" "The one at your house with the broken car." "Are you serious?" "Yes." "So, Mr. Smooth Talker, how did that happen?" "When I was fixing her car, I told her that if she needed any more help, have her call me, so she did." "And you helped her again?" He giggled like a child. "Helped? So where are you taking her?" "Nowhere." "Nowhere?" "No. I'm going to her house. She's making dinner for me." I laughed, happy for him, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to tease him. "You know she's a vegetarian, don't you?" "What's that?" "It's a person who eats only plants. No meat, no eggs, no dairy products." Jeff was a real meat and potatoes kind of guy. There are a couple restaurants that advertise that if you eat a huge steak, which is more like a roast, with salad, vegetables, and dessert, it's free. One of them is located not far from us. Jeff did just that. He was sick for 2 days, but he made it through. No meat, Not even a hamburger? What am I going to eat? Well, there'll be a lot of salad, maybe some beans, and if I'm lucky, some quinoa. Queen? Who? Not the queen. Quinoa. It's a seed used to make many vegetarian dishes. Years ago in the Lake Titicaca area of South America, it was fed to animals before people started eating it. What's with the tidy, Chuck? I'm not hungry anymore. I laughed into the tube. I'm kidding, Jeff. I have no idea what she's eating, but whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be delicious. Go have fun. I decided to call the food delivery service one more time and order my own dinner. The next day, I was hustling around the house. Lori was gone, and I still had over a year left on my lease, so I figured I'd make things as comfortable as I could. I also assumed that my boss would call, apologize, and ask me to come back to work. By mid-afternoon, he still hadn't called, but his wife did. Tim, I'm sick of listening to your father complain about you messing things up. You have a degree? Why don't you go work for someone else if you two can't find common ground? I'm thinking about it, Mom, but you know I'd have to move somewhere else. That's the only thing wrong with that. Why can't you just do what he wants? Because he's doing things the old way. We need to modernize. Have you explained that to him? Over and over, but he's too stubborn to listen. Well, I don't want you to move, so talk to him again. Okay, I promise. He'll get over it and call me tomorrow, I'm sure. I'm looking right at him. Just come back to work tomorrow. He nods his head that it's okay. Now, why don't you and Lori come over for dinner tomorrow? I'd love to, Mom, but she won't be here. Why? I had been putting off telling her, but decided it was time. I started to tell her, and she started to relay it to my dad until he told her to put it on speakerphone. When I was done, he picked up the phone. Here's what we're going to do. I'm firing you so you don't have a job. When it goes to court, you'll have no income and you won't have to pay her alimony. You'll get a job after the divorce. I told you she was worthless, and she proved it. You'll be better off without her, my mother added. Thank you both, but I'll take care of it. I'll see you at the office, Dad. Mom, I'll see you tomorrow at dinner. All the next day, I tried to explain why and how I thought the change would help the company, but my father was more interested in hearing about Lori and telling me, I told you so. After work, we had dinner with my mom, and I had to retell Lori's story and listen to his, I told you so, and my mom added her own. When I got home, Lori was standing on the porch. It was the first time I'd seen her since our thwarted trip. I could see her in the light of the porch light. I pulled into the garage, and from there, I went into the house. As I went to the switch by the front door, turned off the porch light, and then went to take a shower, the doorbell rang. When I was done, she was gone. Finding a lawyer was easy. Finding one that wanted to have anything to do with a divorce that directly or indirectly involved Roger Justin was a little harder, but I managed. Of course I'll take the case. His old man sold me the biggest lemon I ever got and never made good. And so it began. The paperwork, the meetings with Lori and her lawyer. In all that time, I never once spoke to her directly, and other than a visit to the house the night I ignored her, she showed no interest in talking, and I didn't want to talk at all. She cheated, so from my perspective, the conversation was useless. According to Jeff, Lori had moved on to one of the other dealerships, and Roger rarely showed up there. There was talk that Roger had dumped her and gone to someone more deserving. Meanwhile, Jeff and Jenny got along fine, and Jenny's daughter thought he was wonderful. He divided his free time between her house and mine and was happier than I'd ever seen him. The more he talked about his relationship with Jenny, the more I realized that the only personal relationship I'd had in the last few weeks was with my hand. I walked home from work, occasionally stopping by the lawyer's office, the grocery store, or my parents' house. Dad got his dose of "I told you so," and even made a couple attempts to understand my ideas for improving the company. My mom kept finding me girls, and I refused to date them. Our town is relatively small, and I didn't even realize there were as many single and eligible girls as she was finding. I think she put out a casting call. Cute 28-year-old man with a college degree in the process of divorce, looking for a suitable girl. Must be honest, faithful, and reliable. Appearance is secondary to personality for her. Must love music, theater, good wines, and good food. I stopped returning her calls after the fifth date she set me up and told my father that the first time he mentioned setting me up on a date, I had moved to Houston. I finally talked to Lori the day our divorce was final. The judge banged the gavel announcing the end of the marriage, and I approached her. Was it worth it? I turned and walked away before she could answer. Jeff used to clean my car, but stopped because he was too busy cleaning Jenny's car, and one Saturday I was washing it. He pulled into the driveway with Jenny and her daughter Sophie. Sophie was about 7 or 8 years old. They were going to the mall and asked if I wanted to go with them. I dipped a sponge in a bucket of water, wiped my hands, and said, "Let's go." When I'm so bored that I go to the mall to walk around, just to have something to do, I've reached the bottom of the barrel. But that's exactly what I did. We were there for about an hour, and I was starting to regret my decision to come when we passed an ice cream stand, and Sophie asked if she could have some. "Not now, sweetie," Jenny said. "It's too close to dinner." "Well, the hell with it," I said. "Come on, Soph, I want some too." She grabbed my hand and ran. "See you later," I shouted over my shoulder. We licked our ice cream cones and walked, holding hands. "We should hold hands," Sophie said. "Mom told me she doesn't want to get lost when there are a lot of people around, so I have to hold her hand. I don't want you to get lost, so I have to hold your hand too." That's a good idea. We'd been walking for a few minutes now, and when she wasn't licking her ice cream cone, she was chatting away. Suddenly, I felt myself being thrown to the ground, and I passed out, hitting my head on the floor. When I came to, I was handcuffed, surrounded by police officers and an angry mob. I looked at Sophie. She was crying and was being held in my arms by a woman. "What the hell?" "Just shut up, you slimeball. We'll get to you in a minute." "It's okay, Sophie," I heard the woman say. "He can't hurt you now." "He didn't hurt me. He bought me ice cream." "I know, baby. Bad men do that sometimes." "He's not a bad man, Aunt Louise. Where's my mom?" "I called her. She's on her way." "Is Tim hurt?" "Who's Tim?" "Him," she said, pointing at me. Every time I tried to speak, the police officer ordered me to shut up. "Do you know him?" "Yes. He's Jeff's cousin. We're here to do some shopping." "Oh my God," Aunt Louise said, then turned to one of the policemen. "I think I've made a mistake." "Jesus, lady, don't tell me that." He looked at the crowd. "We better get him out of here before this crowd rips him to shreds." He grabbed my hand. "Let's go." Some of the crowd followed us into the security office. I heard words like, "Castrate the bastard," and "Let us take him away." I was getting scared, and every time I started to say something, one cop or another would tell me to be quiet, that I would have a chance to talk later. They took me into a room, searched me, emptied my pockets, and still had me handcuffed. Finally, 2 police officers came in, uncuffed me, gave me back my wallet, watch, and other things, and started apologizing. Jenny and Jeff came in as well. "Oh my God, Tim. I'm so sorry," Jenny said. "My sister saw you with Sophie, didn't know who you were, and thought you were kidnapping her." I rubbed my wrists. I'd seen people on TV wearing handcuffs and rubbing their wrists when they were taken off. I didn't understand why before, but now I did. The damn things hurt. I was pissed off, shocked, still a little scared and nervous. Jeff kept asking if I was okay, Jenny kept apologizing, and Sophie was clinging to Jenny as hard as she could. I looked at one of the officers. "Can I go now?" "Yes, sir. But before you go, we'd like you to sign a release form." "You just knocked me to the ground, knocked me out, handcuffed me, and called me names. I'm not signing any release form until I talk to my attorney." I walked out of that room into a larger room. One of the mall security officers was standing at the door. "Is this the exit?" "Yes, sir, but I wouldn't go in there if I were you." "Why?" Because there are people in there who think you're a child molester, and they're waiting for you. Jesus Christ. Can't this day get any worse? Can't you tell them the truth? We tried. We'll take you out the back door, Mr. Jeffries, the police sergeant said. Him. Or someone else had obviously looked in my wallet and knew my name. Take him to my car, Jeff said. The sergeant looked at me. Why don't you let us take you home? We'll use my car. It's unmarked. Let's go. It wasn't that I was angry or upset with Jeff, Jenny, or even Aunt Louise. I just wanted to get out of there and decided that the quickest and safest way was a police escort. We were already at the back door when Aunt Louise stopped me. I'm so sorry. I saw you with Sophie and thought you were kidnapping her. I took a deep breath. I understand, but I was attacked, knocked out, and a bunch of people out there. I pointed to the main office door. Want to cut my balls off? I don't think you should be talking to me right now. Then to the sergeant. Take me home. After I gave him my address, neither of us said anything until we pulled into my driveway. My phone rang at least 6 times, but I ignored it. I didn't feel like talking to anyone. At home, I started to get out of his car, but he stopped me. Mr. Jeffries, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but from my perspective, I'd rather it happen this way than have a young girl kidnapped because someone saw something but didn't say anything. I'll take good Samaritans like Louise Garner any day. I understand and agree with you on your position, but my name and picture will likely be passed around on the news tonight. Since it was a mistake, it shouldn't have been reported at all, but it's sensationalized, so it will be. The news people can't help themselves. Then the news will say it was a mistake and it's okay, but half the people who see it won't believe that part of the story, and I'll be stigmatized for life. Thanks for the ride home. Maybe it's not that bad. I'll see what I can do. Yeah, and pigs can fly, I thought to myself. I got in the car and drove straight to my parents' house. In the evening, we watched the local news, and sure enough, there it was. When we turned on the TV and found the right channel, it was already showing. We missed the first part of the story, but what we heard said that when you see something, say something, even if it turns out to be a mistake. By not saying something, you could condemn an innocent child to an unbelievable fate. The positive thing for me was that they didn't say my name or show my picture. The commentator even ended the report by saying, "We chose not to name the gentleman for fear that his life would be turned even more upside down than it was this afternoon. On a personal note, I offer him my sincerest apologies. This is Louise Garner. Good night." Well, you dodged a bullet, my father said. It wasn't as bad as you thought it would be. No, it wasn't. What are you going to do now? My mom asked. I think I'm going to leave it alone. If I try to sue for false arrest, it'll get out, and my name and picture will probably end up on the rumor mill. I don't want that to happen, and the police did what they thought was right at the time. On the way home, I remembered my phone. By then, there were 8 messages on there. 3 from Jeff, apologizing for what had happened and telling me how badly Jenny was feeling. Judging by the caller ID, the others were from the city police and the local TV station. I didn't bother to listen to any of them. It wasn't until later that I remembered how the woman from the TV news department ended the program. This is Louise Garner. Good night. Oh, shit. And what did the police sergeant say to me? I'll take good Samaritans like Louise Garner any day. Well, kiss my ass. I didn't get a good look at her at the mall, so I didn't recognize her on TV. The makeup probably made her look different. I called Jeff because I knew he'd be worried about me. Are you okay? He asked. Fine, but still a little shaken up. How's Sophie? She's fine. She got scared when the police jumped on you and dropped the ice cream. She got better when we gave her some more, and she realized you were okay. I'm glad she's okay. Have you seen the news? Most of it. We missed the first part. Hell, that was the best part. Why? Louise started by telling us what happened, and that she was the one who started it all. She said she saw her niece walking with a strange man and basically panicked. She followed you while she was on the phone with the police. She didn't trust mall security, so she stayed behind you and kept the police informed of where you were until they arrived. She took full responsibility for what happened and said she'd probably do it again under the same circumstances. I think I understand that. She was afraid that you would leave Sophie before the police arrived, so while following you, she kept looking for objects to hit you with. She really feels bad. Why didn't you tell me earlier that Jenny's sister was on TV? I didn't think it mattered. It doesn't, I guess. The other night when Jenny was bringing me food, I got the impression that well, that she needed the money. But if her sister's a TV presenter, she can't be too bad. It's a local program, so Louise doesn't make much money. I don't know how much, but I know it's not much. And Jenny's like most of us, I think. She's doing well, but she doesn't have anything extra. If she wants something extra, she has to find the money. She's saving up for a vacation, so she has a second job delivering food. Good for her. Yeah, he paused. I like her, Tim, and she likes me. She doesn't care that I'm slow. I smiled. No one cares that you're slow, Jeff. It doesn't matter to your friends, and we don't care what anyone else thinks. Over the next few days, things went back to normal, and nothing was said about the incident at the mall. I didn't see Jenny or Sophie, but Jeff and I chatted every couple days as usual. It was another Saturday, mid-morning. I was eating a late breakfast of biscuits and gravy when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there on the doorstep stood Louise Garner. Good morning. Are you busy? She asked. Not really. I was just applying ointment to my wrists to ease the pain from the handcuffs. Tim, if I may call you that, I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay. Now that I've been in handcuffs, all my buddies in the hood treat me with more respect. Maybe I should leave. No, come on in. I just got off the phone with my parole officer. She just looked at me sadly. I can only apologize so many times. I'm sorry I bothered you. She turned to leave. Wait a minute, I said. I had no reason to be a jerk. She stopped. I'm still a little offended. I'll get over it. Well, when you get over it, give me a call. She handed me a business card. I owe you at least lunch. I don't know about lunch, but have you had breakfast yet? Actually, no. Do you like cookies and gravy? Sausage and gravy? Yes. One of my favorite foods, she said, smiling. I opened the door wide and she walked in. In the kitchen, I gave her a plate and pointed to the stove where the biscuits and gravy stood. Do you want me to heat up the gravy? I asked. I can do that if you don't mind, she said. Help yourself. Coffee? Yes, please. Would you like anything to put in it? This may seem strange, but do you have chocolate milk? Instead of coffee? No. In it? In it? Yes, she answered timidly. I know it sounds weird, but she was only the second person in my life to add chocolate milk to coffee. The second was me. Only in the last few years had I been substituting it with Bailey's. Did Jeff put you up to this? What? Chocolate milk and coffee? No. Why? I'm the only person I know who does, or rather, has done that. Only now it's also you. Are you sure Jeff didn't put you up to it? 7. I've been putting chocolate milk in my coffee since I started drinking it. My whole family does it. Even Sophie, when Jenny lets her. Well, I don't have chocolate milk, but I do have Bailey's. The rest of the morning passed quickly and pleasantly, and Louise began drinking Bailey's in her coffee envelope. It was the first breakfast she and I shared, but far from the last. We started dating, and I became her biggest fan on television. Our first kiss happened on our third date. We got down to it 3 weeks after that, and it was my first time since we hadn't been together with Lori, and with my aborted trip rediscovered, where the only thing I discovered was that she had cheated on me. Shortly after Jeff and Jenny started dating, he decided he wanted more out of life and started working on cars full-time. Within 6 months, he had his own garage and more business than he could handle. Jenny and Sophie were clearly to his liking. I'm sure there's a scientific or psychological explanation for this, but it seemed to me that Jeff got, what? Smarter? Faster? More alert? I couldn't figure out what it was, but he was different and much more confident. Louise and I helped him when he moved in with Jenny. Sophie became his shadow and went everywhere he went. I saw them holding hands and told her that she wasn't letting him get lost. No, we don't let each other get lost. I couldn't think of anything nicer she could say about him. A year after the divorce, I found out that Lori was getting married again, but not to Roger Justin. She was marrying some poor guy who worked for the city sanitation department. They'd known each other for 5 months. I mentally wished him luck. I figured he would need it. I had long ago realized that I didn't hate her or even dislike her. We were both to blame for getting married so early. Of course, the infidelity was entirely her fault. Life had been good for almost 2 years. Jeff and Jenny planned their wedding. Louise was the maid of honor, and I was the best man. Their parents divorced when Louise, the youngest of the siblings, was 4 years old. Their brother was to walk Jenny down the aisle. The lease on my house expired and I moved in with Louise. Marriage was never discussed, and we were both perfectly happy that even in the midst of Jeff and Jenny's wedding plans, there was no talk of our wedding. There is a publication that lists vacancies on radio and television stations across the country. Unbeknownst to Louise, the guy who hosted her news program had collected some of her old videos and sent them out to much larger markets than our little neighborhood. He liked her work and wanted to help her promote herself. One day, she got a call from a television station in Houston. The news director had seen some spots and asked her to send more. Eventually, he asked her to come to Houston for a talk. She was thrilled, and we talked about it. It was a dream come true for her, and we decided she should go. Then, after the interview, she told me that one of the videos he saw that made him want her was the one where she thought I was kidnapping Sophie. The conversation went well. They gave her an on-camera audition and told her they would call her. They did. 2 weeks later and offered her a job. The decision to take the job was a foregone conclusion as far as I was concerned. It was a huge step towards a possible national gig, which is of course what every TV host aspires to. My hard-headed father was finally persuaded to do a couple things my way, and the change paid off. Our business grew slowly but surely, and I was happy to help him. He was happy, I was happy, our employees were more than happy, and profits were very high. Moving to Houston was not a viable option for me. Houston was a 4-hour drive away, but Louise and I decided we could endure the distance and preserve our relationship. And we did. For 6 months. Then trips to each other's houses and phone calls became less and less frequent. We couldn't watch it on TV because our cable provider didn't provide that option. I could watch it online and often did. She only worked there for 3 months and was moved from the newsroom to a daily talk show where she and her co-host chatted with guests and the studio audience about everything in the world. They also attended virtually every charity event in the broadcast area. Their photos would occasionally appear in the newspaper and on the website, and it seemed like she was having the time of her life. Oddly enough, so was I. The tasks of a growing business suited me perfectly, and I was spending less and less time doing what Louise was doing. The downside, of course, was that I was sleeping alone. At least I was. I didn't realize she was sleeping with her handsome coworker or anyone else, but since Lori was my only reference point, the thought of it never left me. One Wednesday morning, I drove to Houston to surprise her. I told my dad I was taking the rest of the week off and going to see her. "Does it have to be this week?" he asked. "It's been quite a while, and I think she and I need to talk." "I'd rather you wait." "I can't." Right after we talked, Jeff called and said he needed help in the afternoon and asked when I could be there. "I'm going to Houston. I'll be back on Sunday." "That will be too late." "What's so important that it can't wait?" I asked. "It's something for Jenny." "Jeff, I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm leaving for Houston." Their show aired live every morning. In the afternoon, they would research their guests and plan the next day's show. They didn't just come in, do an hour-long show and go home. They spent all day researching and developing the program. I got to her apartment just after noon. I decided to wait for her there, but found that my key no longer worked. I rang the bell, but there was no answer. I went to the manager's office and asked for a new key. She recognized me and greeted me warmly, but when I told her what I needed, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." "Why?" "We have a new policy that only the tenant can authorize the issuance of keys or admission to the premises, and they must physically sign for the keys." "But you know me." "Yes, sir, I do, but rules are rules." "Let me ask a question." "Okay. Would it make a difference if I was her husband?" "That depends on who signed the lease. Only the tenant can authorize it. Period." Leaving her office and walking through the parking garage, I headed for my car. Her reserved spot was empty. I called her from the car. Without answering, I left a message for her to call me. She did call, just a few minutes later. "Hi, honey," she said when I answered. "Hi. How are you doing?" Same old, same old. What's up?" "I was thinking of coming up for the weekend." "That would be great. I have to finish the project we're working on by Friday." "Okay, what's the project?" "It's one of the charitable organizations our boss is involved in. We're designing a contest with lots of prizes for the biggest donors. It's fun, but a lot of work." "Are you working on it today?" "No. I needed some rest, so I took the day off." "And what are you doing?" "Just resting." "Good for you. Get some rest and I'll see you on Friday." "Okay, sweetie. Take care of yourself. Love you. Bye." I tried to say, "Love you," but I failed. I walked back through the garage, past her still empty parking space, to the elevator, got off on her floor, rang the bell several times, and waited each time before giving up and leaving. For a very brief moment, I was torn between leaving and continuing to watch and wait for her. I even thought about calling her again and telling her where I was, but decided against it. She had made her bed and was probably already lying in it. The problem was that it wasn't her bed, if that's what she was doing. I left. I took my time driving home. There were two cars on one side of the driveway and two parked on the street on the other. One was my parents' car, the other was Jeff's. I wasn't in the mood for company, and since they thought I'd be gone for the rest of the week, I wondered why they were even here. I pulled up to the house and used the remote to open the garage door. Louise's car was parked in the garage. I got out of the car, and the door to the kitchen was opened by Jeff. Bowing at the waist, he invited me in and then led me into the living room where my parents, Jenny, Sophie, Jenny, and Louise's mother and brother and Louise were standing. "Ned!" Louise stood in front of the fireplace surrounded by the others. Jeff nudged me toward her. Everyone was smiling except Louise. She just looked nervous. I walked over to her and she got down on one knee, thank goodness. "Tim, I love you. If you're going to kidnap someone, I want it to be me so we can live happily ever after." "Will you marry me?" she asked, holding out a small box to me. The events of the day faded away as I opened the box and found a gold ring with a diamond in the setting, staring back at me. She was still on one knee when I pulled the ring out of the box and took a closer look at it. I started to put it on her finger, but she stopped me. "No, silly. That's an engagement ring. You can't wear it until the wedding. That is, if there's a wedding, because you never answered me." I looked around at the faces in the room, then looked at her. "Sure, why not?" Everyone applauded. "Romantic?" "Not at all," but I said it with a wide smile, hugging her. "You're such a jerk," she said after we kissed. "Of all days, you chose today to come visit me. You almost ruined the whole thing." Dad patted me on the back. "We didn't know what to do. You insisted on going to Houston, and Louise was on her way here. Even Jeff tried to stop you. We talked to her, and she told us you'd probably be back tonight, so we went on. What was so important that you insisted on going tonight specifically?" I looked at the people around me. "Honestly?" "Yes," everyone but Sophie and Louise said in unison. Louise said, "Let me try to explain." She took a deep breath and took both of my hands in hers. For the last couple of months, we've both felt like we were getting further and further apart. Two separate lives and living a few hours away from each other. We were both happy in our jobs and lives, but felt like something was missing. I looked back on my time in Houston and remembered the parties, the fun, the people, everything I wanted out of life. My job is perfect, but my life is incomplete. It's incomplete because I can't share these beautiful moments with you. There were tears in her eyes as she continued. I knew that if I have these feelings, you will have them too if you love me. The feeling that you want to share every aspect of your life with me, about what's good about your business and how happy you are when things are going well. She paused. Am I right? All I could do was nod my head up and down. I love you, Tim, with every fiber of my being. And I love you, I told her, and I meant it. At that moment, the party started. Sophie, Jeff, and Jenny were the last to leave. Sophie wanted to hug me, so I took her in my arms. Does this mean you're my uncle now? She asked in a whisper. Yes, I whispered back. Good. When they left, Louise and I sat on the couch, each with our own glass of wine, leaning back relaxedly, content to be in each other's company. Do you know another reason I went to Houston today? I asked her. I think I do. Why? You were worried about me living there alone and possibly starting a relationship with another man. Were you? What? Have a relationship with another man? Yes. No. The only men I've had real relationships with have been my producer, the studio crew, and Thomas. Thomas was her co-host. Thomas was the one I was most worried about. All those events you went to and your pictures in the papers. I was worried and jealous. She leaned over and kissed me. Silly girl. I could tell you that Thomas is gay and you have nothing to worry about, but that would be a lie. The truth is, he's the most narcissistic bastard I've ever seen. He expects people, especially women, to bow down to him. We worked well together, but I personally don't care about him, and he doesn't care about me. She sipped her wine. I wouldn't lie about him being gay, but I lied to you. I chuckled. Yes, you lied. My manager helped. I was just on my way here when your dad called and said you were on your way there. I called the manager and told her what was going on. She said she would take care of it. She called me a few minutes later and told me that the repairmen were on their way to change the lock on my door. She decided that if you could get into the apartment, you would stay and wait for me, no matter how long it took, which neither of us wanted to do. I felt like I knew you well enough to know how you would react if you thought I was doing something wrong, so I chose that direction. I knew that if I gave you a reason, you wouldn't bother to ask for details. Your experience with Lori would make you think the worst and act accordingly. I'm sorry I misled you, but I knew it would lead you back here, to where I wanted to propose to you in front of your family. Do you forgive me? It was unmistakable. Of course I forgive you, and I'm sorry I agreed so clumsily. I was in shock. She laughed. We all wanted you to be shocked. Well, I was. I leaned over and kissed her. I loved this woman, and then I took another sip of wine. What time are you leaving back to Houston? It was a 4-hour drive and she had a show, so she usually left in the middle of the night. I'd forgotten about her show that day. Or are you driving back tonight? I asked. I didn't want to waste any more time. I wanted to get her into bed. And soon. Well, she stammered, let's talk about it. Tonight's show was taped on Monday. The shows for tomorrow and Friday were taped yesterday. Friday's show will announce that it will be my last show because I want to go home to be with my future husband. I sat back and looked at her. That's okay, right? Of course it's okay. It's better than okay. It's great. But won't you miss it? Yes, but I miss you more. And I was hoping to convince my old station to let me create a show featuring local heroes, talents, events, and people. It should last until... Until what? Until the baby comes. And then we'll see. I took a sip of wine. She sat back and looked at me. Did you hear what I just said? Yes. I just didn't know Jenny was pregnant. She shook her head. She's not pregnant, Goose. I am pregnant. Oh. I managed not to drop my glass as I set it on the table and grabbed hers. Our life is beautiful. Louise is back at her old station and is hosting the same show she did in Houston, just without a co-host. Our daughter Danielle is great. My dad's business and my business are doing well, and Sophie can't wait to be able to walk Danielle and hold her hand so she doesn't get lost. The end. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.